Hello there.
Well, hello everybody. How y'all doing?
Hey Adam, how are you?
I'm all right. Can you hear me fine? Because I can go put my headphones on.
No, we can hear you okay. You're
All righty.
grizzly.
How's it?
Uh,
What?
You look like a giant bear.
You know, I get that a lot these days. I have my beard comb with me.
Yes, that's fascinating. Okay, so we are at the start time. I'm going to look. A few more people are joining. So we will get started in just a second. It says we're all cooped up in our houses, and you're just outside enjoying the great outdoors.
Look at that.
Well, there's not a whole lot else to do out here, unfortunately. Well, we had a terrible. Yesterday was like almost like a hurricane out here. I mean, the rain, the wind. A lot of people lost power, and so I do have one friend who's stuck at home in the suburbs. 3 children, his wife, and his mother-in-law, and they have no power.
Ooh,
yeah, so that's hell.
That sounds pretty rough. But you didn't.
We didn't lose power, fortunately, but I mean, a lot of trees went down and stuff. But that's the one danger of being out here. Yes, you can social distance, but when the shit hits the fan, like you're just fucked. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
On that note, let's go ahead and get started. So so this is the first time that we're doing this. So bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. I've participated in a number of these Zoom webinars, but this is my first time running one. So so for those of you attending, bear with us in case anything goes horribly wrong, like Adam combing his beard on camera.
All right, put the comb away.
The way this is going to work is, Adam, David, Nick, and myself are going to be chatting. We've got a few things to show you guys and some stories. And I also have a few questions that folks have sent in ahead of time. So we'll be getting to a Q&A at some point. For those of you in attendance, you can put questions in the chat, which I see many of you are already doing. And then you can also, there's also a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen that's on the kind of right side. So if you have questions for any of us, you can post those there and we will take them a little later. But I think what we'll do is we'll go around and introduce ourselves, and then I think Nick has some stories to tell us about some watches. So I'll start. I'm Kathleen McGivney. I'm the CEO of RedBar, and just kind of make things happen with RedBar around the world, but mostly in New York. Adam, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Adam Craniotes. I founded RedBar completely by accident many moons ago, and Kathleen is correct. If we did not have her, and I tried to do this, I think we said the other night, we just all light on fire. So yeah,
all of us would combust. So so that's why I'm doing.
That's why she's here.
Yeah, David.
I'm David Sharp. I'm the general dog body in the UK. Try to kind of oversee a lot of the UK chapters, and I help organise a lot of the events with a couple of different chapters, London with a few of the other guys, and Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Great. And Nicholas. And
I'm Nicholas, the 4th Managing Director of the Fears Watch Company, one of Britain's oldest watch companies. It's a delight to be here this evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
No, and thank you for being here. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. I know a lot, especially the folks that are attending that are in the UK. I'm sure know a little bit about Fears, but I would love to hear you hear your story, kind of just directly from you about like what inspired you to restart Fears as a brand, and kind of your vision for the brand itself.
Certainly. So, as I say, Fears is one of Britain's oldest watch companies. It was originally founded in 1846 in western city of Bristol, and it ran right through until 1976, so 130 years. And it passed through 3 generations of the Fear family, started by a chap called Edwin Fear and passed to his son and then his son, and then it closed in the 70s. And it lay dormant until 2016, when I had the pleasure and honor of restarting it. And my link to Fears is I'm Edwin Fears' great-great-great-grandson. So I'm the 6th generation of the family, which is why my title is 4th managing director, because there's only been 3 before me. All of them were my ancestors. But it doesn't always translate, because a lot of people, they'll go, oh, that's great. I want to talk to the 1st managing director, the guy in charge. I'm like, no, he's sadly 6 foot underground. So as I say, it's a family business. It's been in my family for 174 years. However, I didn't fully become aware of the business until I was halfway through my apprenticeship at Rolex in London. So I'll give you a brief background to my weird CV. So I did a degree in economics. I did an internship at Deutsche Bank. I was going to become an investment banker. And then I had good fortune of graduating in 2008 as the entire financial world blew up. And at the time, it seemed like the worst thing to happen to the economy ever. Nowadays, it's slightly different. And I scrambled around for a job. I ended up working in public relations for 3 years, but realized that I really wanted to do something that I was passionate about, something with my hands. And after 7 months of pestering them, Rolex eventually took me on as an apprentice. So I was at Rolex for 5 years. And while I was there, I decided I wanted to do my own thing one day. As great a company as it is, and it is an amazing place to work, I think if you've got that itch to run your own business, you've got to take the plunge sometime. And I wanted to create something. And so one weekend back home with my parents, I sort of jokingly said, well, what could I do? What should I do? And my mum sort of jokingly goes, well, why don't you restart the family watch business? If you want a light bulb moment,
God bless Mum.
Yeah, exactly. It's that sort of thing where you don't really put the 2 and 2 together, and there's all that moment. And so that was 2014. I left Rolex in 2016 at the beginning of, and then restarted in November 2016. So the business has been running now for about 3.5, maybe 4 years. And we are very proud today to build our watches in the UK. So we source all of our components across Europe, but we're a very, very low run manufacturer. We only make a few hundred watches a year, but it's always been about high quality regardless of the cost. So sadly, that means our watches aren't the cheapest, but we like to think they're some of the best made.
That's great. So I have a couple of questions for you that came in ahead of time, and I wanted to kind of ask you these first, and then we can get into some other topics. But one of the people, Bradley, has asked whether the Fears tagline of "elegantly understated" precludes any complications in future watches, or if not, which are the easiest to incorporate as part of an elegantly understated design?
Wow, that's a good question.
Nice.
No, I think the first quick answer is the tagline doesn't preclude. See, I'm dyslexic, can't even pronounce words. Certainly, there will be complications at some point in the future. I think, though, I think there's 2 things. One, it will be complications that I personally love, things that I find are useful or interesting. And then I'd say the other one would be sort of the whimsical. One of my favorite, I don't think it's even technically a complication, but one of my favorite watches of all time is the Hermès Le Temps Suspendu, where you can press a button and the time disappears and goes to invisible time. The watch keeps running mechanically, press it again, and it resets itself for no other reason than it's just amazing. And I know that's not a complication, but that sort of thinking I love. In a more down-to-earth idea of what Fears could achieve in the sooner term, things like, sort of moon phases, the things which are beautiful to look at. Now, a moon phase, I don't think is that useful. I've never liked them. The Vacheron 56 complete calendar completely changed my view of a moon phase, because all it is a dark blue sky and a silver disc for the moon. It hasn't got stars, it hasn't got faces. It's basically an elegantly understated moon phase. And I love that. And I think it looks stunning. If you look at the blue dial version of that watch, I think that is possibly the most beautiful moon phase. And whether it's useful or not, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think so. I am, sort of known for my love of the moon phase complication, despite it's absolutely impractical. It's not useful in day-to-day life for really almost anybody, and like except maybe witches,
Werewolves.
werewolves,
Yeah,
werewolf, like A+. But one of my favorite pieces, and I talked about this this watch on the Time for a Pint virtual get together that I was on a couple weekends ago, which is just my Arnold and Son HM Perpetual Moon, because it's other than the moon phase complication, it is just a time only watch, and the whole top half of the dial is taken up by the moon phase disc. So it's because it's just kind of like a romantic complication. It's very impractical, but it is kind of cool and it's kind of neat, and I really think it's beautiful. And the way that they executed the moon on that moon phase disc is stunning. It's like the surface of the actual moon, so it's just really, really pretty. So I love it. So I think a moon phase complication, even though like you said, it's not essential, not useful in day-to-day life, is just a cool complication to have.
But Kathleen, I think you have to also, if you're talking about this particular watch, talk about what you originally wanted for the moon phase.
Yeah, I wanted the Death Star instead of the moon. And so I actually got, well, and I kept sort of joking about that. And then Lee, 1 Hour Watch, that he does all the watch illustrations,
I saw that.
drew me an image of the watch with the star in place of the moon. So that was pretty cool. So I did enjoy that. There's a couple of
That's no moon.
That's no moon. There's a couple of other folks in the comments that are saying a Fears Perpetual calendar would be awesome. And also let's see, Matt, the watch nerd, is asking if there's a Fears and Agenhor collaboration in the future, maybe, with the movement maker, which would be very interesting.
By the way, the perpetual calendar thing, that's quite interesting. So like that, it would be the complication for me that I would love to own, just because I love the fact that actually it's quite useful. I'm not born on the 29th of February, but I'm born in February, so I've always been aware of the leap year and stuff. But my favorite perpetual calendars are the ones where, and if Fears was to do one, basically it would look like just a freehand and a date. All the information would be on the back, because all you need to know is that the date is correct. That's the elegantly understated perpetual calendar. But I have to say, the Moser perpetual calendars,
I was about to bring that up. When you're talking about a minimalist, they've done an amazing job.
It just strips it down, and actually what you're looking at makes sense. It's sort of, I can imagine it as an owner, it would take a while to fully appreciate everything at a glance. But you know what, like, it's the complete opposite of, say, like a Portuguesa, which is beautiful, but like, it's got everything there. Like, it's telling you everything. And you're sort of like, okay, great, what's the time,
I have an IWC perpetual, and, it's wonderful, but especially as I get older, it's very hard to look at all those little dials and stuff. And it's, they're throwing everything at you. So there's something to be said for that minimalist approach. So yes, we want to see that from you.
Yes. Okay. Right. We'll get
on that.
Lockdown.
We've got another question, which I think it's a little bit, it's off of the complications topic, but it's a question from Kathleen from the 10 and 2 podcast, and she's asking, can you go into a bit of detail about what inspired your recent "Don't Buy a Fears" posts online? As a small business, she thinks this was an incredibly bold and brave move, and she can't imagine that it's an easy one to make. And I agree with that. I think that was, those posts were very, very direct and very, and very interesting move for a small business. So can you just talk to us about that a little bit, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as well as saying sort of brave, and I'd also, it could be a very foolish thing to do, but I'll tell you what it was. So the way lockdown happened for me was on Friday the 13th, I actually was flying out from the UK to the US with my family, and we were going on a big 2-week holiday, basically 4 days in Fort Lauderdale in Florida, and then we were boarding the Queen Victoria and sailing back to the UK. And it was just our family, the 4 of us, without, my husband and my brother's girlfriend. And it was going to be just a lovely time away. And we knew, obviously, coronavirus was coming, and we knew this would be our last holiday for a long time. And as we flew out, we found out mid-flight that the cruise was cancelled, so we knew we were going to turn around and come back. And then, sadly, subsequently of that, my mother is now recovering from coronavirus, which
thank God.
Or while we were over there, or flying back. And so beside the woe me, my holiday was ruined. But I came back to the UK at an absolute down, because I'd been needing a holiday, I'd been wanting a holiday, and then suddenly you're coming back and the whole world's being turned upside down. And my first day back in the office is sat down with the company accountant, going through all the numbers and working out what's going on, and suddenly I realized that I was still getting the odd newsletter about launching a new watch or a new product, and I was like, okay, I know I'm not in a happy place right now, but this really tastes sour. This just doesn't feel in keeping. And especially as it became clear that borders were closing and everything was changing. And then obviously the lockdown in the UK took place, and suddenly you're aware that people are worried about jobs, and everyone is beginning to not panic, but it's not business as usual. And yet I still see businesses talking about new products, and I get the idea of distraction. But when they kind of tag on at the bottom going, oh, because of COVID-19, we can still ship and there may be delay. And I'm just like, oh, come on. And then, some of the brands, I won't name them, but I just thought it was very tasteless and tacky. Anyway, that made me angry. But I realized that as a business, like every business was sending out a coronavirus email. I was like, actually, we do regular newsletters. I need to put out a newsletter. I need to say something. I just didn't want to do one which said, wash your hands, stay 2 meters apart from people. That just was like, no, everyone knows that. And also talking about, shipping and, the business is still not open for online orders. Again, that just felt a bit, right, great, And then I was thinking, actually, you know what? Down the road from here are my favorite pubs and restaurants in Canterbury, and they're all independent. They're not owned by breweries. And, they were all saying, we're closing, but we're going to do takeaway. And I was thinking, you know what? Actually, supporting them is really important. And, as a business, yes, I want to sell product. I need to sell product. I have employees. It's not just me trying to, fund a lifestyle or anything. But at the same time, maybe it's because I'm half Yorkshire, I've always run Fears quite lean. We run a lean ship. So it's not like we had any fat to cut out. We were lucky to go into this with some cash reserves. So it was like, okay, we're not an immediate worry, but these businesses are. So actually, there is a time to buy a beautiful watch. But maybe right now, the time is someone else. And in the future, once we get through this, then it comes back and to buy the watch. And also, it's not forgetting that the people who are working in jobs, the business owners, but also the waiters, waitresses, everyone has a risk. Everyone could be a potential customer of a watch company, whether it's Fears or whether it's another one. So actually, the whole thing is cyclical. It's not just a case of saying, no, just buy this and forget them. It's like, no, actually, we've got to remember everyone. What a beautiful sky. I wish we had that in England today.
I think that's a really valid point. I kind of really valid point. Sorry, hold on. Just because, I also feel like supporting the local restaurants and local businesses is very, very important, especially given that, my immediate thought in New York when all the bars and restaurants were told to close on the 16th of March was all of my friends that work in the industry. You know, I've got a lot of friends who are bartenders and servers and sommeliers and restaurant owners and chefs and all of that. And all of them were immediately out of work. Like
yeah.
the restaurants that were able to stay open to do takeaway still had to lay off most of their staff because, you know, there's not, you know, they couldn't have them working in close proximity. They had to have, you know, they had to drastically reduce the amount of food that they're producing and all of that. But there's massive implications to that in the supply chain as well. So as we were chatting when we were kind of gathering, one of the things I thought about is, you know, I eat at a lot of like farm to table restaurants because I'm a little bit bougie, and those small farms are massively impacted by the fact that, you know, these restaurants that basically, you know, support their existence are all going to be shut for quite some time, and it could cause these small farms and these other small businesses to fail. So there's a big impact that kind of goes down the line. And you know, while I do absolutely understand and I totally respect your decision to make those posts and take that stance, I do also recognize that other businesses and in the watch industry, you know, maybe aren't as fortunate and don't have the luxury of having cash reserves. And so, you know, I've seen some brands doing things like, you know, a certain percentage of the purchase price goes to relief funds and things like that, where they're able to hopefully keep their businesses afloat as well as support other small businesses. Yep. I think, you know, that's also another approach. You know, I did find it, you know, both amusing and infuriating that every company that I've ever even thought about doing business with has sent me an email to tell me how they're dealing with COVID-19. You know, that's fantastic. I've signed up for your email list in 1999, and thank you for sharing that with me. You know, there's been a lot of unsubscribing going on in my house. But
GDPR in the UK in 2018, suddenly everyone who's, you know, ever had your email is suddenly going, quickly send it out to everyone, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just been kind of an onslaught of email about that, but yeah, I think I absolutely understand and agree with your you know, your stance on this, and I think it's great, especially if you can get the message out that, you know, supporting other local small businesses is just as important, because, you know, those at some point we'll be back to something resembling normal, and it's going to be a very different world if we don't continue, you know, try to at least support the local businesses that are near us, because those businesses might not survive it if we don't. So
well, and that's actually a really good point, because, you know, when I went through all the numbers with the accountant, you know, I was saying, right, well, what outstanding invoices do we have? And I'm proud to say in 4 years of trading, we've always paid every invoice on time. And, you know, I was very much like, right, what invoices do we have outstanding? We need to, we basically need to know like what we owe people. And within a week, we'd settled every single invoice to all of our suppliers. Some of them we settled 3 weeks early, because I know that, you know, from our photographer to our dial maker, which is one of the world's leading dial makers in Germany, when speaking to them, guess what? The big brands don't pay on time, and especially not now. Whereas,
no, they don't.
You know, I always pay them the moment the invoice comes through and the delivery's been made. So especially now, because they have to make payroll. The photographer, he needs to exist at the end of this. Like, at the end of the day, I pride myself on working with small family-run suppliers, some of which are the best in the world. Nearly all of them based in Europe. You know, I've worked with them for 4 years. I've built up relationships with them. At the end of the day, to sound selfish, I need them to be in business when we get out of this, because, you know, I've got new watches to launch, probably not 2020, maybe now in 2021, but I don't want to have to go back to starting and finding, you know, new businesses and trying to build up the rapport. You know, no. I want to work with the people who I like to work with. And I think this is the worry is, yes, a lot's changing right now, but it's also making sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I've got, I mentioned earlier, I've got a few employees. All of them they're not on furlough because we still got work to be done. And because they're not on furlough means they won't be eligible for the UK government's payments, which means they still need to be paid. So I took a pay cut as soon as I got back from my failed holiday, 100% pay cut. And though I wasn't living extravagantly, it's just more cash to like eke out the the next few months and make sure that also we have finances to rebuild the business afterwards. So I was talking to David about this last week, I think it was. So very glamorously, I'm now 5 mornings a week, from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. You'll find me working here, packing home delivery orders. And then when I get home at 9 a.m., I go to bed for an hour and then wake up and get back to running a watch company. So yeah, for 6 hours a morning, I'm working at Asda, Walmart, basically making sure that people aren't coming in and shopping and can get home deliveries. And then once I've done my 11K of walking around a supermarket, scanning items, I then put my hat back on as a managing director of a watch company. That means I can still pay my mortgage, still pay my utilities, still make sure I have a roof over my head, but it allows me to make sure that my employees can still be paid at the end of the month. It's a cyclical thing, right? Everyone's got to, everyone's got to kind of see how it all links in together. So yeah, it's strange times, but at the same time, we will all get through this. We just need to make sure we work out how.
That is really amazing, and I think really inspirational that you're doing that. So, I think it's been a kind of heartbreaking decision for a lot of small business owners that they, some of them can't do that, and people had to let people go or furlough them, through no fault of their own, just literally because the cash doesn't add up, is terrible. So it's definitely a great commitment to your staff for you to do that.
Very much so.
So let's go. I'm gonna take the tone of this a little
Yes.
and go. Let's do a wrist check. So we've had a couple of requests for wrist check. So Adam, can you show us what you've got on today?
Sure. I'm wearing my Pulsar P2. If we can see that. So this was the world's first mass-produced digital watch, and it made its debut on the wrist of Sir Roger Moore in the Bond film Live and Let Die, 1973. I don't know why I can't take this thing off right now.
Is that the one where you push the button and it?
Yeah,
lights?
and all it does is it tells you the time, and you hold it down, it gives you the seconds, and you set it via a magnet that is hidden in the clasp. There's a little compartment, and then on the back of the watch, there's a slot for hours and a slot for minutes. And you just hold it there, and it'll start, depending on whether your hours or minutes, it'll start advancing the time for you. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. And yet this was the sort of the epitome of technology and the future of timekeeping. When this watch came out, it actually cost more than a Submariner, which of course it was replaced with in the movie. But yeah.
That's really cool. David, what do you have on today?
Today I have on, if the light's okay, Citizen Eco Drive Titanium. Yeah.
Who are you and what have you done with
David? David's in hiding. No, I love this little piece. This is a great little piece. An inexpensive little piece, but it's a case back, solid case back, titanium piece. If I take it off, there we go. It's a solid case back.
Cool.
It's a great little piece. Fantastic.
Yeah,
love wearing it. This is a blue one, which I believe they only issued in Europe. So I know there was quite a few folk in the US trying to hunt this watch down, but this is a little one that you can only acquire here.
I enjoy the Citizen Eco Drive, but it is sorcery as far as I'm concerned. That any light that being able to be powered by any light source, just dark magic. So Nicholas, what do you have on today?
So I'm wearing one of the Fears Brunswick Blues, which is a watch we launched at the end of last year. But I'm currently wearing it on, so just before lockdown, I put it on this £12 eBay bracelet. And well, I haven't got any of my tools to take the bracelet off. So now it's just permanently on the bracelet. But I really like it, actually. I was saying earlier, definitely I'm going to see if it can make some kind of bracelet similar in style, because I quite like the style. But it's it's a nice watch. And actually, now that the weather is getting nicer, going out in the sunlight, this dial looks so much. I mean, we launched it in November when it was all dark, and it looked good enough then. But now in the sun, it's like, it's lovely, and it's nice seeing owners sending their photos. It looks really bright. That
I saw at the Watchmakers Club event, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yes, yeah.
It's really, really beautiful. Like I remember specifically just being really impressed with how nice that dial was. So at that event, so it's really great. And it does. You're right. It does. I've seen you post a couple of pictures of it on that bracelet, and it does look really good on it. It's like
it's more contemporary, I think. Like, it's a classic watch, but actually it is sort of, it
makes it a little bit more sporty, which that watch generally doesn't go in that direction on a
no.
And so it's quite cool.
Interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that, though, Kathleen. I think when I was lucky enough to go to the launch, Nicholas, with you when you launched the blue dial, and I think the comment I made was that the blue dial really changed the kind of look of that watch from the white dial. It made it go from quite dressy to actually sporty, but maybe in a kind of 60s, 70s sporty way rather than a modern sporty look to it. But the blue definitely looks much sportier than the white dial.
Yeah, that's true. The white dial one definitely goes more formal.
Very much.
It's much more formal than the blue dial one. And then
so should I ask you, Kathleen, what are you wearing?
Well, I have
speaking of
K2998, which I hate to be. I've been wearing this quite a lot since I picked it up in my last trip to London, and I was talking to somebody else earlier today, and saying like one of the reasons that I'm wearing this so much is because it is associated with this fantastic trip where I saw you, Nicholas, I saw you, David, and we were all, I remember you talking about this holiday you were about to go on with your family, and we were all talking about what the term state of emergency means in the United States, and like that was that it was meant to be a way of getting federal funds for the state at the state level. And this whole conversation, but that trip was such a complete contrast to what we're dealing with right now, where I was having fun. I was on holiday. I was hanging around with people I enjoy spending time with. And so it's like wearing this kind of reminds me of that, and that hopefully that, we'll be back to doing those kinds of things soon. So, plus it's also just a great watch. So let's see if we have any other questions. So, okay, a question came in for you, David, which
Here we go.
is from Matt Craddock. He said, speaking of dark magic, the new Joker Night Dracula, bloody good or fangs for the memory?
Oh, God.
Good old Matt.
But great.
I don't actually, I'm trying to work out what the actual question there is, if there is actually a question or if it's more a statement.
I just want you to talk about the watch a little bit.
Does you want just to talk about the watch?
Yay or nay?
Yeah, yay or nay?
For me, it's definitely a yay. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great.
Fangs for the memories.
Fangs for the memories.
Like an A+ dad joke there. Okay, so Nick, so I know you had been talking with David about some of the watches that you have and have had in your collection. And I'd love to hear a little bit about them, because one of the things I love about, just the collecting community and just even the people that, whether they have a watch business or not, just the folks that are super passionate and the stories that they have around, you know, the watches that they, and why they love them and how they came to acquire them and the ones that got away. So I would love to hear a little bit about those pieces.
Certainly, yeah. I was chatting to David about them, and I was sort of like, really, there's sort of the five key watches. You know, there were loads and loads of sort of cheap fashion watches when I was a teenager, but you know, we'll ignore those. But yeah, the first sort of proper watch. When I say proper watch, I mean a watch that like I picked out. Was a Casio when I was 10 years old.
Nice.
And yeah, and well, let me show it to you because I've even.
Oh my gosh, you have it?
Look at that.
Oh.
So this Casio, I picked this out when I was 10 years old, and at the time I was wearing a Timex, which I was given when I was 8 years old. But it was tiny, like it was a tiny little thing. I wanted something bigger and, you know, bit chunkier. And I remember going into, I think it must have been like H. Samuels or someone. Anyway, I saw this watch and absolutely loved it. My parents very kindly bought it for me. And I wore this all the way through sort of like primary school, end of primary school and secondary school. And in fact, don't know if it will show up on the camera, but this one is very, very special. You won't find another one of this model because this one has been scratched in with my name. That was done in a math class with one of those compasses, you know.
That is wonderful.
You're self-engraving the watch. So I wore that watch.
So glad you kept it.
Well, and the problem is every time I put a battery in, it lasts for about 10 minutes and then it dies. But, you know, I couldn't get rid of it because, you know, also, interestingly, it started my love affair of white dial watches. And it's a chronograph. And actually, it's one of two chronographs I've ever owned. I'm not a chronograph guy. I don't really like them. I don't get them. But the next main watch came when I was 15, and it was a watch that my father had. And actually, I think he is watching this, so I probably have to be careful because I don't know if he knows I stole this from him. But
he does now.
Exactly. It was his Tissot PR50. And what I loved about this watch when I was 15 was I had just learned two words that like changed my life, and that was Swiss made. And this watch has Swiss made at the bottom of the dial. And that was, okay, you know, realistically, back in 2003, this would have been what, you know, £120 watch. But I was the coolest guy in the world in my eyes because I was wearing a Swiss made watch to school. And I loved it. I just loved its white dial, the numerals. It's just, you know, very elegant, very nice. Anyway, this is the watch that got me down the rabbit hole. And so that was when I was 15. When I was 18, I bought my first, what I'd call like proper Swiss watch. It was an Omega Seamaster GMT.
Nice. Well done.
Which I think nowadays is known as the Great White.
Yeah, I know that watch.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gorgeous. And so from the ages of 16 to 18, I was, you know, I was doing my A-levels at school, high school, and then I was doing a Saturday job, a Sunday job, and I was also doing some graphic design work freelance for people so that I could save up the money to buy this watch. And originally I was going to buy actually the watch you bought, David, the Bond watch. Yeah. And I basically set up an Excel spreadsheet and put each month like what was going into the savings account. And then suddenly I was like, oh, actually, you know, you do that thing, we're going, well, actually, I was going to get the Quartz Bond watch. But, you know, if I save for a few more weeks, months, I can get the automatic. And if I save for a bit longer, I can get and you just start going up the sort of, you know, the price scale. Anyway, I then read an early review, and this is like, you know, pre-Hodinkee blog to watch days, you know, and it was a review on a forum, and it was basically comparing the Explorer 2 with the Polar White dial and the Great White, and the price of those watches brand new from AD, the difference was about £450. You know, it was almost nothing. But I bought my my Amiga brand new for £1,330, and yet that was a stupid amount of money to spend on a watch, over £1,000. I mean, to think of getting a chronometer rated automatic GMT Seamaster for that today, right? But you know, back then that was like ridiculous money, and like no one I knew had a watch like that. And I was the geeky weird kid because I liked watches. Like no one liked watches. But this was 2005, right? You know, watches weren't really cool outside of, say, being, you know, in an investment bank wearing a big bang and going, look how cool I am, I've just bought this with my bonus, which is actually why one of my guilty pleasures is the Big Bang watch. Because of that, doing an internship in an investment bank, I always looked up to the bankers wearing their big bangs, and I, you know, to me it symbolizes everything pre-recession. But anyway, so I wore that Seamaster loads. University, I wore it when I got married. I wore it at graduation. I, you know, wore that watch all the time. Absolutely loved it. And there were a couple of other watches, but they were sort of cheap and cheerful. But that was the watch I wore all the time. And I do remember when it had its first service being really sad that it came back all polished, because it basically had eradicated, and this is where my father needs to close his ears if he is listening, it eradicated 3 years of drunken nights out at university, you know, where it got banged up and stuff. But, you know, that was my watch. Anyway, when I started working at Rolex, basically, if you're wearing a non-Rolex watch, you can't really be wearing it. You can have it on the workbench, but, you know, if they have a visitor, you have to hide it. And you know, so I was like, right, okay, so I'm going to need to buy a Rolex at some point. And I'll be honest, I wasn't a Rolex boy. Like, I wasn't a Rolex fanboy. I was proud to wear an Omega, not a Rolex. And very quickly working for Rolex, I was like, actually, these watches are good. Like, they're well, I was sort of, you know, yes, I drank a lot of the Kool-Aid, but I was like, yeah, this is cool. And the first watch that I ever really noticed, I remember being 8 years old, and in the Sunday Times magazine, which is a magazine with a Sunday newspaper in the UK, there was an advert for Rolex, and it had someone wearing a day date. And I remember thinking that having that wonderful display at the top was basically like, that was the most clever thing a watch could display. And why wouldn't every watch display the day of the week like that? And then also, because it had the baton markers, it had little Roman numerals within the minute track. And again, I was just like, that's so clever. Like, that's just a neat piece of design. Anyway, didn't know anything about the watch until I started working at Rolex, realizing, you know, actually, I've always loved that watch. You know, it's so iconic. But you can see, not just because of my pink walls, but how pink my skin is, I couldn't wear a yellow gold one. So after I was at Rolex for about two and a bit years, I've been saving up desperately, and I purchased a brand new white gold day date. And that was my Grail watch. And I was just over the moon to be able to wear every day my Grail watch. And it was white gold, president bracelet, smooth bezel, so very under the radar, didn't look like a Rolex, white baton dial. And yeah, that was an amazing watch. I mean, it was an expensive watch, but it weighed 150 grams on the wrist. It was just, it was wonderful. And I used to even wear that like on a Sunday going down the pub in my jeans and a rugby shirt. You know, I'd still wear the Rolex. I just loved it. But that watch, along with all the other watches, they all got sold when I restarted Fears. And I don't regret selling the Rolex at all. Like, okay, I won't lie. If I go to a RedBar and someone's wearing a day date, as the first RedBar Bristol, a chap came along and he was wearing a yellow gold day date. And I think I spent about half the evening just cornered him and just was like, I've got to try on your watch. And that was amazing. But that Omega, I really, really wish I hadn't sold that. And I've got the desk and the chair that paid for in my locked down office. But I miss that watch because of its sentimental value. But then at the same time, I'd be sat on some wooden crate and, laptop on my knees. So I needed to sell it. But this brings us through to the fifth watch, the fifth one, which is this one, which anyone who follows
this is the best one.
There we go. So this is another chronograph. This is the only other chronograph. Also, like the first chronograph, you'll see it's a black case. But this is a PVD, factory PVD, Seagull 1963 heritage chrono. And there are several things I don't like about watches. One is chronograph, 2 is PVD, 3 is Chinese movements, and 4 is NATO straps. And this came on a NATO strap. But it went up on my friend James, who runs Kibble Watches. He put a photo of this watch up. And I think I bought it within about 10 minutes before I'd even asked the price. I just, you know, when everything comes together and you go, that's beautiful. I should technically not like it because of all these rules I've set myself of what I do and don't like. And yet I love that watch. And also because it was about 120 quid, I can wear it and bash it around. And I'm loving how the PVD's wearing. And it's not just chipping off, it's actually wearing. So you're beginning to see the metal come through. And to me, that is 21st century patina. I love it. It's like what people must have had in the 50s when their chromium plating started to wear on their watches before full stainless steel cases. And actually, I wear the Seagull when I'm working at Asda because I mean, it's not just called a beater, it's an actual beater because it's being like whacked into things. And it's already had quite a fair amount of damage already. But what's quite nice is that is, you know, years from now, that watch will never get sold. I'll have that watch. And I know that every time I look at it, I'll be looking at like, you know, 12:30 in the morning when I'm getting up to go to work, or like when the shift's ending. And it's like, that watch is now very quickly associated with me for this period of life. But also, like with clothes, it's nice to get home, take the watch off, take a uniform off, and then put on, you know, a shirt and, you know, fears or something else, and sort of suddenly you're in a different frame of mind. But yeah, no, my watch collection is rather lacking of sort of the fancy, expensive pieces, I would say.
I mean, that's the thing that I love about just kind of RedBar in general, is that people's collections vary from everything from, you know, the people that only collect vintage to people that collect, you know, like a lot of stuff that's kind of on the lower end of the price range. Then there's the people that only collect independents. You know, there's just this vast kind of, it doesn't matter if like it, for us, especially, you know, for, you know, how we approach it in New York, and I think, you know, all of the chapters as well, is that you just have to like watches. You don't have to know more than the next guy. You don't, you know, there's no requirement beyond liking watches, right? It's like because we've, and I've talked about this before, we've had people that came in with a friend who was already a member who were interested in watches but didn't know anything, who've gone on to become collectors. But you can come in, you can hang around with people that have, as like the four of us alone, just the diversity in our, you know, kind of collections, our personal taste, the complications we like, anything, all of that is, you know, wildly differs from person to person. But that's one of the things I love about it, is that you can get the perspective of other people that, you know, don't think like you, and you know, and may have a different approach, and it's all really fascinating. So, and you've got stories behind it too. I as you were talking about that Omega, I was like, oh, that's the one that got away. That's, you know, you could immediately tell as you were talking about, you know, wearing it for your wedding and you know, wearing it for all of these occasions. I immediately knew that. I was like, oh, he either he still has this one and it's like the most prized part of the collection, or it's the one that got away that you pine for. And so,
do you know how I almost got it back? Wow. I tell you what, I was traveling. It was the night before I was traveling up to Glasgow to record an episode with Rick and Ricky and Scottish Watches. Shout out to those guys. And I knew they were going to ask me about watches and what watches I'd had in the past. And so I was desperately trying to find a photograph of the Great White. And so I went on to Watchfinder, who was actually the place I'd sold it to several years before. And I found a Great White. They had one for sale. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I noticed that actually the date of when it was purchased was when mine was purchased, the same year, the same month. And I was like, that's weird. So anyway, I went through all the old emails and tracked down my serial number. So the first thing I did in the morning was call them up and was like, can I check the serial number? And of course they said no. And I said, okay, well, this is the reason why. I will give you what my serial number is, and you tell me if what it is correct. 7 digits off. 7 digits off. It was made 7 watches before my watch was made.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's a shame. And I was gutted, but I was also like, I'm not about to buy it because it's not my watch. It's like almost my watch, but it's not my watch. And then the guy started a really hard sell saying, well, you'll never get your watch back. Like, you've got to buy this right now. This is the closest you'll ever get. And I was like, no, it's about the sentimental rather than the physical thing. But yeah, for a few hours, I thought I'd got my watch back, but no. So.
All right.
Yeah, but that speaks volumes to how these are more than just watches. You know, when listening to you talk about your collection, and as you said, it's not a whole bunch of fancy high dollar stuff, but each piece really means something to you, which makes it far more valuable. People will ask me sometimes, what's my favorite watch in my collection? And they're kind of surprised that it's not necessarily the most expensive one. You know, it's the watch that is going to tell stories. It's the watch that you put on. And, you know, like you said, when you were a little upset that the watch came back a little smoothed out with all the dings and dents that told the story of the piece. I think for a lot of people that does mean something. I know I have my first good watch was a Rolex Submariner. I think it's the same for a lot of people. And I bought it in college with, you know, money from my godfather had passed away. He left me a little bit. He said I had to do something stupid with some of the money. The rest had to go to my parents. And I've been working, and I bought a used Rolex Submariner. And I have it to this day. It'll go to my son, as I've said many times, unless he's an asshole. Then I'll weld an Invicta to his wrist. But it has some very specific damage to the crown and the crystal that my then girlfriend, now wife, did to the watch. And every time that I've had it serviced, and not by Rolex, because they'll replace the dial and the hands and kind of ruin it. It's a transitional matte dial. But I always tell them, they've been asked, well, do you want us to replace the crystal at least? Because it's all chipped on the side. Or how about we replace the crown? Because it's got this huge divot out of it. But I'm always like, no. Because when my son gets the watch, I'm going to point out very specifically, your mom did that. And to me, that's important. You know, your mom did that. Now, once it's his, if he's like, fuck this noise, I want it to look new, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. But I still feel like those stories are important. So I loved hearing that from you.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to, there's a couple more questions. So there's a question in here for you, David. Says, how much are you wearing your moonshine these days? And he also goes on to ask this, I see that Nicholas has a gold piece in the Fears collection too. Is gold 100% back in vogue?
Okay, well, I'll start. I still wear the moonshine regularly, as many would attest to. It was the watch, again, for me, it was a watch that I swung back and forward on because a bit like Nick, I think the phrase I used was my skin is so pale that if I wear a gold watch, I look like a gold top milk bottle. So I literally, I was offered it, very kindly offered one, and I said no because I didn't think it was for me. Then I got my hands on one. It was the Carney piece, and suddenly things changed, and there was a lot of back and forth about can I maybe please have one now, thank you very much. And again, as most folk would know, I always buy a watch on a bracelet, but the first thing I immediately do is take the bracelet off them and put it onto a strap. And it's one of the very few watches that I haven't taken off the bracelet. And I have the gold deployant, and I have the red strap to go with it, which haven't been near it because it is a piece that I really, really didn't think I would A, like, and B, wear. And it's beaten me on both of those sides. I wear it a lot, and I really do love it. So the answer is a lot, but it's not necessarily a wear about the house watch. If I was to wear that whilst on lockdown, I think I would definitely have one arm significantly longer than the other.
Used to say you don't always. Oh, never mind.
That's a personal chat. Wrong channel. Wrong channel.
Yeah. I'll see myself out.
Nicholas, what do you think about gold watches and you know, I've noticed that I've started to, like, I am not a yellow gold person at all. Like, I have always been white metals all the time. Like, it's just because I am also just as, I mean, look at me, I'm pale. I look like a ghost. So you know, yellow gold on me, just, I've always felt like it didn't look right on me, but I am gravitating towards it now. And I don't know if it's because I'm seeing it more or what, but I picked up a couple of years ago, we were doing, but right when Instagram Live started, we were doing these little chats in the Analog Shift office Analog Shift was hosting them, and they'd get out a few watches and we'd all chat and stuff. And there was this two-tone Rolex GMT that was, you know, steel and yellow gold sitting on the table while we were doing the chat. And my eye just kept going back to it the whole time we were there for the whole hour. And I bought it. I ended up buying it, like, just because I don't know why it was, and that was like the first watch with any kind of yellow gold on it that I had ever liked. And now I'm finding myself kind of liking them now. So anyway, what are your opinions on gold watches? Because again, I know all of us have had some skin tone challenges with with wearing them. So,
well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to precious metal, I like my rings are both in platinum. I've always been a platinum boy. You know, ever since hearing the song Santa Baby, where she's wanting a deed to a platinum mine. I remember as a teenager immediately like trying to find out what this expensive metal was. And after that, I was like, well, gold's gold, you know, whatever. And I've always kind of poo-pooed it. But I did realize I think it was about 6 to 9 months ago, I started looking at gold more. So for anyone who's had a gin and tonic with me at any point, you'll probably know one of my absolute favorite watch brands of all time, and my grail watch is a Laurent Ferrier. And
well done.
Initially, it would always go to a steel or to a white gold, you know. But actually, I was lucky enough to go to their official dealer in Paris in February, because my husband was living and working in Paris before lockdown, and we went and tried on loads of watches, you know, for fun, you know, with that sort of, you know, imaginary money. And I found myself wanting to and trying on more and more of the gold ones, and not rose gold, because rose gold actually works quite well on a pinkish skin tone. And obviously rose gold is very in vogue, but I think that's the thing, it's in vogue. And once you start seeing it on like phone cases and like, you know, it becomes that sort of color that's just plastered everywhere, it loses a bit of its luster. Whereas gold, I think, put it this way, when I was growing up and when I first started getting into watches, sort of in the 90s, a lot of the watch that most people would wear would be some sort of gold coated, not solid gold, but gold coated little quartz Seconda or something like that, you know, or maybe a Seiko, but not a fancy Seiko. And it was just like, it was a sort of hangover from the sort of 60s and 70s, where solid gold was like, you know, that was the cool thing. But like, not everyone can afford solid gold, so they go for the gold plate. So you ended up seeing it usually on a lot of not very interesting, rather bland looking watches. And that's kind of always stuck here. And then you went through the noughties and referencing Hublot again. You know, you'd suddenly see gold being used, you know, and it was very flash and very bright, and it was more, you know, the bigger, brighter and all of that. And then once you came out of the recession, again, gold was still like, you know, I don't know, it wasn't a cool metal. I now look at a solid gold watch on a strap, like just a black strap, simple dial, and I think that's the coolest thing ever, because I think it's so timeless. You know, a gold watch is just, it's got all those lovely connotations of, you know, at the end of a successful career, you'd be presented with the gold watch, but also as a color, I don't know. I've got a book actually on my bookcase that my parents bought me as a kid, and it's about some king in an island, and he becomes obsessed when they discover when they discover gold. And anyway, it talks all about, the book very eloquently talks about the color and how it drives him crazy, and of course the story of Midas and all of that. And actually, when you look at something that's gold, I mean, try finding the Pantone reference for gold. It's impossible. It always looks fake. It's just a beautiful color, isn't it? Like when you just stare at it, like without kind of sounding like some sort of crazed, Midas wannabe, like actually when you look at gold, and David, like your watch, when I've seen it and held it, yes, the weight is fantastic, but actually it's the color. You're drawn into it because it's not yellow, it's not brass, it's
gold.
There's just a warmth to it that you can't quite explain.
Yeah, and you can't fake it. You can't. As I say, Pantone can't reproduce it. A screen can't reproduce it. Whereas white metals you can, because it's a lot of white and greys and all that. But I mean that's not really a very scientific or sort of proper answer. But yeah, I think it's. Actually, it needs a bit of time, and this is probably cyclical. 20 years time, we'll be having a conversation going like, my goodness, do you remember when you said gold was so fascinating and wonderful? Ugh, it's so outdated and tacky. But actually, I don't know. I think I also have noticed that. I think two things. I'm not old, but I'm not necessarily young. I'm 33, so I'm in that sort of in between age.
That's young.
Sure.
That's a baby.
But it means that I can now look at sort of wearing a gold watch doesn't look like I'm wearing my dad's watch. Actually it can be like, I'm wearing this, I've earned this, and a gold watch is expensive. So it is that thing you feel like you need to kind of have earned it. So I think there's that. And there is also the other thing, without trying to reference too much about what's going on at the moment. That it's a lump of beautiful, heavy, precious metal. It's something that's always there. It doesn't disappear. And that's why gold has always kept its value. A very interesting, this is the economics geek in me. Sorry for rabbiting on, but I promise you this is vaguely interesting. A troy ounce of gold in Henry VIII's time would buy you a tunic of the most beautiful, rich purples, beautifully made, a beautiful outfit, basically. A troy ounce today will buy you, an entry to a Savile Row suit. And I think that's fascinating, that basically a troy ounce of gold buys you a beautiful outfit, and has done over those hundreds of years. I think that is inflation busting at its core.
Interesting.
That is interesting, and not something I'd ever thought about before. That's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, can't say I have either.
Okay, so I think we're about out of time. There were a couple of other questions, but I just don't think we have time to get to them. So one of which was about whether or not Nicholas could tease the next Fears release, which I believe is the answer probably is no at this time.
Yeah, that's correct.
But thank you guys for participating. Thanks to everybody who attended. We will put this recording up on our YouTube channel after we've got it edited. So thanks again, and we'll do another one of these tomorrow with Bulova. So see you again soon. Thanks.
All right, it was a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for being there. Thanks, guys.